Welcome everybody back to Veil of Sound. Yes, one of our summer interviews, late summer interviews, and I'm very, very happy to once in a while talk to somebody who can understand me. So from one Torsten to the other Torsten, Mr. Kinsella, glad that you can join us.
Yes, it's fantastic to be here. Thanks very much. It's an honor as always.
It's a pleasure for us. And for everybody who's now wondering, wait a moment, Torsten Kinsella, I've heard the name, yes. You've already seen it in the title to this interview. God is an Astronaut is not only a great band, has people with wonderful first names, Torsten and his brother Niels,
Yes.
but they're also releasing a new record in a couple of days. And so, of course, we have to sit down with you and talk about everything that's going on. First question that we always ask here on the Veil of Sound is like, is there any kind of band merch, shirt that you're wearing, record apart from your own that you would like to plug? So anything special?
God, you put me on the spot now. I wasn't prepared for that one.
Well,
I'd have to look at my phone at this point, just to see what have I been kind of listening to or whatever.
And you're not allowed to mention a new Joe Quayle record or song because we're gonna get to Joe later.
Oh yeah, no, I won't do that. It's only embarrassing. I won't do that. But Joe is fantastic. I really do like Joe. Yeah, I haven't really been listening to too much music. I just, a friend of mine, Gaz from Butterfly Explosion, put me onto a group called Dive or Div, or whatever. They're kind of like a shoegaze band, and yeah, he's played me a few songs which I thought they were pretty good. So I enjoyed that. Apart from that, yeah, I haven't really been kind of. It's usually when I go on the road when I'm on tour, I try to find records just to kind of keep me busy in the on tour on the van. But I haven't, as I said, we just been full steam ahead trying to get this album done, and we've been rehearsing like a lot to try and learn some of these songs off, which are a little bit challenging, especially Embers, so that's kind of where we're at.
We'll get to that one. That is definitely a very, very interesting track in a very positive way. Not interesting as the little brother of Shitty, but interesting in a very, very, very kind of melodic way. I like that track a lot. As
Right.
I like the whole record a lot. But you've said that you like to go and like to get music for on the road. Are you then also one of these people who, if he has the chance, goes into record stores along the way and goes crate digging?
Yeah, sometimes I definitely like to pick up some vinyls and different records. And when we're on the road, we meet a lot of different bands and a lot of cool bands, and we pick up CDs and stuff on the way. So there's never a shortage of music, that's for sure. And I think we're living in a time where there is so much good music. There's a lot of good music coming out, and there's so much good music coming out. Sometimes you could miss quite a lot of good bands. So that seems to be the problem.
Yeah. Tell me about it. I remember the beginning of June, and there were basically albums of the year dropping daily. And it still continues, I think. It's true. I think we are blessed to live in this day and age. We have a lot of access to really good music, but sometimes it's hard to keep track of everything that's going on. And that's why we have to talk about Embers, about the new record. Torsten, could you try to describe the new record in 3 words, not sentences, words? I've also done it for myself.
Okay.
And let's first hear yours, if you have 3 words that you could use.
I would use emotive as one word.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just kind of, I suppose, if I was to go stylistically, I would say it's psychedelic, progressive.
So that's already 3 words.
That's 3 words then. Yeah, I guess that's it then.
It's interesting. We have one in common. I said emotional, very emotive, emotional, definitely true. I also have 2 more adjectives. One of them is Eastern and one of them is clear. And Eastern, I chose that because, first of all, correct me if I'm wrong, but there seems to be a connection between you and a Persian dance project or something like that that happened last year. Echo, I
Echo
forgot
Tal.
the, yeah, Echo Tal.
Yeah, that's David Rooney he actually did the artwork for the album, so
Yeah.
he also is Echo Tal, and we did. Yeah, he'd written that song Kadira, which was it was my idea to kind of put a bass groove to it and try to keep it kind of I guess kind of more groove based than some of his other stuff, which was kind of more downbeat. And that was definitely an experiment. I think it turned out pretty good, and I wish it got more attention overall, because I do think his material is quite good. Again, as we were talking about, there's so much good music, so it's not surprising that certain stuff will get lost in the white noise, as they say. But we've been working with Dara O'Brien, who's the sitar player. We worked with him back on the self-titled record briefly for the song Zodiac, and he did a little bit, which is very hard to detect, but there's a little bit of sitar in Snowfall as well in the second, I call it second verse, but there is no real verses. But there is a little bit of a sitar line in there. But my father always loved the sitar, and when he passed away in December, unexpectedly, I might add, I felt I needed to honor some of his kind of ideas that he said to me, maybe try to introduce the sitar on a couple of these songs. I think it could be something that will, it just kind of, it worked so well before and it really wasn't exploited enough. So I decided to kind of honor my father's idea there, and I contacted Dara O'Brien, who was really, really delighted to participate. And this time he said, like, give me much more time to work out some of these lines. And for, I think, over 4 or 5 months, we kind of sent demos back and forth. And I was really, really happy with what Dara put to the whole record. And it did add, as you said, an Eastern vibe. I said psychedelic because, the Beatles and the
Yeah.
whole thing. But yeah, I guess there is an
Ravi
Eastern.
Shankar thing, yeah.
There you go. So I guess my father was a big fan of the psychedelic rock scene. So, that was kind of where my mind was at. But yeah, we were in India recently enough, and we were telling them that we have sitar in our new stuff. So they were really excited to hear that. So, yeah, so I guess Eastern is a good description, Middle Eastern, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. For me, I don't know why, but it became already clear with the opener, with Apparition. I felt some kind of, I don't even know if there's a sitar on there, but there are certain vibes that reminded me of the tuning and of the soundscapes that you get if you, for example, listen to bands like Tina Riwen or other like bands from the Maghreb, from the whole North African region, and then going all along into nearly India. Yes.
Yeah, there is sitar on the first track. It's kind of layered in with the guitars, and
Yeah.
there's also cello, distorted cello that Joe put onto it. You can hear it quite clearly on there's a kind of the middle part where the riff kind of comes in. It's kind of like a repetitive riff, but halfway through that riff, there's a kind of I really like what Dara did there. It's a kind of a low sitar tuning that he put over. It's kind of yeah, I think it's prominent enough. You can kind of hear it. You might not think it's a sitar because of the way he's played it, but yeah, it added a bit of as he said, a bit of an ethnic flavor to the track. So I kind of really like that, rather than. I mean, it was just kind of I was even saying to Niels, if we could kind of not limit it just to kind of like a rock record, can we expand on it? And the idea of the acoustic guitar came in on a couple of songs, and that again, that's the Echo Tal project, because that was mostly acoustic guitars, and it was kind of useful to add acoustic to it because it made the sitar sit a little bit better. So even when you think there's no acoustic guitar, there's actually layered in the background behind the distorted guitars. There is acoustic, and it helps the sitar just kind of find its own seat in the mix. So I added quite a good bit of acoustic guitar in the tracks, especially on Odyssey. They're quite prominent on that one.
There, it's definitely prominent, yes, and that's also something that I like. And that is also very interesting about the record. It is audible in a very positive way that you as a band have been trying out new stuff. But interestingly, it never felt as if you're trying for the sake of trying, but it felt as if you're trying to expand.
Yeah,
And
for
that is
sure.
definitely something that I like.
Yeah, I think you know, on this record we knew we had, you know, quite a lot of material. We actually had even about 5 or 6 tracks that we shelved even, but we've written a lot of songs. And I said to Neil, so we really need to work on the style, because we were always a group that was so focused on the content that sometimes we kind of overlooked the style. And today's style is definitely considered to be maybe even equally as important. And I don't particularly agree with that, but I have to acknowledge it. And I said to Neil, if we can even, you know, why can't we use acoustic guitar to play some of the lines instead of the electric guitar? I mean, we can do the electric thing live. There's no problem, you know, but just for the record, maybe we should approach this a little bit less like a live band and more like a project, the way we used to do things. And that kind of opened up the door. And Neil's, you know, he tried a lot of different things as well. I mean, he came back to his bass arpeggio pieces that he kind of used to come up with for a moment of stillness, and all is violent, all is bright, there was bass arpeggio. So he kind of come up with a couple of lines in that vein again. At this time, like, obviously we were still, it doesn't sound like there's much timing signature change, but there's a lot of timing signature changes. Like this, like the first song is 7/4, and there's even in Falling Leaves, there's drop timings in that as well. So we were kind of, you know, kind of trying to kind of just keep things a little bit more sophisticated rather than going for 4 counts and stuff like that, even though there is plenty of 4/4 in there as well. So we experimented on that. Lloyd was very particular with his drum sound. That, you know, he wanted the drums to be more prominent on this record, so that was something that we had to really really, you know, listen to Lloyd this time, and he was very specific with the kind of kick drum sound and snare sounds that he wanted. So we took a long time on the drums, and because we weren't recording it necessarily all as together live, you know, it gave Lloyd plenty of time to sit there and kind of, you know, just really nail the performances. I will say though, I'm glad that we got Embers out of the way, because I never thought we'd finish that one on the drums. That was just,
You mean the track itself? Yeah.
track itself was just, he was, I mean, it's his own fault for coming up with those beats, but there's bits where there's like a 15.5 count to go into one part. I was just thinking, I don't know how the hell we're gonna even do that part live. It was very intricate piece of music. And again, I added acoustic guitar into that rather than just leaving it distorted as well. So yeah, I think we tried our best to kind of to expand on the style. Joe Quayle, again, you know, it's worked with us in the past, but again on a much larger scale on this board. And she also does stuff for Echo Tal as well. So I decided, you know, I'll send it to Joe, see what she comes back with. And Joe is, as always, you know, it's just so intuitive and knows exactly what we wanted. And I have to say, everything that she sent, I used. It was not I didn't even have to go back to her and say, could you like do this or do that. Joe just knew what we wanted. So it was really great to have Joe on board.
First of all, when you describe the way that you have approached the record, I would like to ask, is this record more form follows function, aka content, or is it still a lot of function following form?
Well, content is always king for me anyway. So content is the most important thing. But I will say that what we did with this record, we definitely wanted it to be a high production. So it was a kind of almost like a sound experience that we wanted to create.
Yeah.
So for example, when the heavy guitars come in, there's about 8 of them. And you might not think that. So there's like a Marshall hard right completely on the one speaker on the heavy bits. Like Fallen Leaves would be a great example of that. And then on the other side, I'd have another Marshall, completely different Marshall with totally 2 different guitars. A high watt sitting completely down the middle. A Vox AC30 left 50, a Fender Twin right 50. So that's the amount of guitars that are actually coming at you. The idea was I wanted it to, when you put on the headphones, you just felt like you're in this big wall, but there was no mid dip. And you get that with a lot of records where they have a hard left and right, but there's not much sitting in the center. And you definitely notice that when you hit the mono button, it disappears. So I really wanted to make sure that when you mono it, it still had a full sound. And when you mono it, funny enough, that's where the high watt amp kind of pops out, because that's where it's sitting. We had to, again, I don't want to get into studio technical talk, that's a different
No. It's still totally understandable. Don't worry.
Yeah, so I had a big challenge to phase align it. So I used a plugin called Sound Radix Auto Align, and then they had this other plugin called Pi. And the reason I had to use both, so I had 4 mics on each of the cabs, so I had to align them within themselves. And I had it pretty good, just in the room, but it still needed to be aligned to be perfect. I then used, because even though you're using different guitars and different amplifiers and different speakers, there's a bit of phase cancellation. So I used that plugin Pi to completely remove any phase cancellation, which was really a useful plugin for me. Very CPU unfriendly, so I had to really make sure I got the sounds right going in on tape, to be honest. But that was interesting to have. I've never done that before. I would have had maybe like a guitar left 50, maybe another guitar right 50, and left it at that. So this is the first time I decided I wanted to have that full big sound. And Neil's kind of moved away from the short scale bass on this one back to a long scale bass with the Music Man. And yeah, he wanted to use a mixture of the Zampeg and Darkglass pedals. So we really worked very hard on the sounds on this. So I don't want to. It was definitely what I would say. Phase 1 was writing all the stuff, picking the best that we felt that we had, and phase 2 was then getting the right guest musicians on it, and phase 3 was definitely just getting the recording as good as we could. And it was Niels was kind of made a good point. We wanted to make sure that there's a whole new generation of young listeners coming up today, and they're used to a very hi-fi production.
Yeah.
We come from the early 2000s where there's lo-fi post-rock or whatever or instrumental rock was kind of fine, but today I don't think they understand that. So we really wanted to make sure that we could pick up some new listeners, and we want to make a big effort to make sure that the recording and the sound of it was really, really good. And we got it mastered by an English mastering engineer called Streaky, who I actually took a tutorial lesson from him, how to do my own mastering, but I learned quickly enough that I wasn't going to compete with him. So I said, I'll give it to Streaky to do. And he was really, really good. And again, he usually masters dance music and pop music. But it was really interesting when he kind of really favored the low end energy much more than what I would call a normal rock mastering engineer. He really loved the power of the low end. So that was interesting getting that back, and I really enjoyed the way he mastered it. But yeah, I think that was essentially, obviously I'm breezing through it very, very quickly, but that was kind of the process.
What is also very striking, and you are totally right when you describe the sound as being very different from a post-rock sound 20 years ago. 20 years ago, that lo-fi thing led to a certain kind of crispiness, right? Because it was not defined clearly enough. Whereas when I listen to your new record, there is still a lot of crispiness in it, but it's a crispiness within the sound, not on the outer edges. The outer edges are very clear. The sounds are very defined within their certain space. Was that also important for you, that, make clear where everything is?
Yeah, I wanted to make sure that when you listen to it, that you could hear all the layers that kind of went into it, rather than in the past. And you're right when you say that it was kind of the overall sound create the crunch rather than the individual sounds. This time I had to use probably more saturation than previous records because of the nature of what we were doing. I have things like here, like Harmonic Culture Vulture, which I threw the sitar through. They're like analog tube distortion. So I end up using more of those tools, where in the past I probably didn't. It was probably already fuzzy and distortion enough just because of the nature of the recordings, I should say. But this time I really wanted to make sure that the guitars, in isolation sounded almost really, really, really high quality, and then maybe add saturation to that to give it the crunch that I do like. So it's definitely a different process. I don't think it's what I would call, if you were looking up how to record post rock instrumental rock music, yeah, it wouldn't be this way. So it's definitely a different way of doing it.
However, as much as we've nerded out now on the sound, we also have to talk about the concept of a record. Correct me if I'm wrong. If I, at least that's the way I understand it, if I understand it correctly, a lot of a record is about the passage that we all go through from birth to death and about the brevity of that voyage. Is that just my imagination, or is that really, in a way,
No,
part of it?
that's definitely a part of it. I kind of have to tell you the story of my father, who my dad passed away on November 28th. In the back garden here, he was completely healthy. There was no warning signs, and he died of a heart attack at 3 p.m. in the afternoon. It just kind of made me. It really affected me, and still affects me very badly. There was a really strange emotion when he died. One that was just complete sorrow, as you can imagine, but gratitude for everything that he had done for us. And I wanted to capture that, because we had he gave us such a good life, and I really wanted to capture some of the positive sides on this rather than doing another epitaph record where it was just kind of essentially dread, and it's not what it wouldn't have been accurate for me. So I wanted to kind of capture everything that my feelings for my father, and the feelings for everything that he'd done for us. And I'd written 2 songs straight away. Even later that night, we sat in the kitchen, and I grabbed his acoustic guitar, his famous acoustic, and I wrote Falling Leaves. And then the day after, I wrote Odyssey. So those 2 songs are kind of it captures, there is sorrow in it, but there's also hope, and there's a kind of a journey. I kind of like to think that maybe he's gone on a new journey now, and I wanted to kind of capture that. Maybe it's my imagination, maybe life just ends when we pass away, but maybe it doesn't. So I'd like to think there is some kind of afterlife for my father. At least I hope so. And I wanted that really changed, I'd say, kind of added to the record in a way that that was different than where it was going. I'd written some songs prior to that, like Embers, and slightly darker, funny enough, than the newer stuff that I'd written for this record. But it was always going in a kind of at least in my mind, a kind of a weird psychedelic, progressive kind of journey. The whole album really is about twists and turns and a journey to one place to another. What I didn't want to do, we never really overdid it, but in the post-rock genre, I that a lot of bands tend to kind of write maybe 20-30 seconds of material, and then they kind of tend to kind of break it down and then build it up to a crescendo, I guess. And I really, really, really don't like that format anymore. I wanted to kind of create where if you listen to the first 30 seconds, it doesn't tell you what's going to happen for the rest of the song. I think that's important, because I think that formula of, it's almost like lazy writing to me. I want people to be taken on a journey, and that was one thing that fits the whole theme. All throughout all the songs, there is essentially a journey, bar maybe 1 or 2 of the ambient ones, which are just what I would call mood setters. They're not necessarily what I'd call the same comprehensive compositions, but they're just kind of like moods. But overall, I think most of the songs do take you on a journey, and I think that's very fitting to what was on my mind. My father, the journey that we had shared together between, obviously, he'd been on tour with us. He did all the driving in the early days, and there was so much good memories. And I did a little nod to his band, the Orange Machine, which was a psychedelic rock band from the late '60s, and I kind of I grabbed some old fuzz pedals, you know, that he had, and I used those as well, just to kind of, you know, it's a small nod. It's, you know, most people probably wouldn't even hear it, but there is a kind of a more, there's not much distortion. It's mostly fuzz pedals that I used, you know, that was kind of a small thing. So I kind of let that whole experience essentially dictate where I should go with the recording of it as well. And again, as I said earlier, the sitar as well. It was something I probably wouldn't have done only for my father passed away, and I knew that he loved the sitar. So I definitely I was glad that I did that, because I think it helped quite a bit. But yeah, that was that. So I would say most of the songs are a journey, and kind of from life, from birth to death, and maybe beyond. So.
First of all, before I come to my real next question, is the legend true that your father has seen more or less every gig you ever played?
Yeah, he came to every single show, bar
Wow.
bar last year, where my mother had said to him, "It's that time you kind of retired," and he didn't want to.
Let the boys be men.
Yeah, you know. So, but he came on to the last tour he came on was China, so he insisted that
Yeah.
he go on that one. So he came there, and that was his ended up being his last trip. He would have ended up playing had he survived that day, obviously, or hadn't died that day. He would have been in Turkey the week after. And I know he made sure that he was down for India, which happened a few weeks ago, or a few months ago, I should say. And but yeah, he done all the driving, and and my father, you know, was, as I said, in the music business for the 60s and the
Yeah.
70s. So he really enjoyed, you know, from the 2000s returning back to the music business. And my father would, you know, as he said, he taught us a lot. He taught us how to play our instruments, and helped me a lot with the songwriting over the years as well. And he had a great knowledge of what I would call different keys, and how to get from one
Mhm.
key to the next. So that was kind of that was you know, he was very good that way. If I wanted to, there was actually one part I should say I can tell you, it's Heart of Roots. There's a part in the middle where I deviated kind of off key, but I needed to get back to where it was, and he created that. He actually helped me write that whole piece in the middle, where it's down from the piano back to the other part. So he had a great knowledge of different chords and keys to kind of go where I needed to go back to. So yeah, I owe my father a lot, as the band does, and he did all the van driving, as I said, for probably the first 10 years of touring for us, and merchandise probably for 15, 20, you know, 16, 17 years
Yeah,
doing.
I remember seeing him on one of your tours in Germany, and I didn't know it was your father until a few years later, and I was like, okay, I've
Yeah,
seen that man.
yeah, he was, you know, he was really, I have to say, he liked touring more than we did, you know. He really did, you know. That
Don't
was,
let your mother hear that.
you know, yeah, she was begging him to stop, but he'd say to me, "I'm not ready to stop." But
Yeah,
it's unfortunate, you know, his time was cut short. No
yeah,
warning signs, and but as I say, you know, it's, I still think, you know, he was 78, but he lived a really good life, and
yeah.
we're thankful for that, you know, for sure.
Um, and you've spoken about his former band, the Orange Machine. Um, are there still any band members to whom you could show things that you now have done on the new record that to you are reminiscences to your father?
Yeah, his when the funeral happened, his the singer from the group, Ernie from the States, Ernie Durkin, came over, and he wanted to know what I'd been working on. He'd seen us a few times in the US when we played there, and I played him uh, Odyssey, and he goes, "I'm getting a bit of an Orange Machine flavor off, you know, the latter part where the sitars
Mm,
and the guitar chords. So you really like that." And
cool.
he was, yeah, he really loves the sound. He likes the band as well, you know. And anytime we played the States, he was always there, you know, in Phoenix, Arizona, and he traveled to Seattle sometimes as well.
But that's probably one of those moments that made you feel even more assured about what you were doing, right? If somebody from his band comes up and says like, okay, I see the vibe. That's probably very reassuring, isn't it?
It was for me, because you know, I knew, you know, they took their music extremely serious, and he knows that even on Falling Leaves, you know, yeah, he could hear the as Robin used to be the guitar player for the Orange Machine, and he had that kind of broken up fuzz sound, you know. So he said it's a bit slicker with your sound, but I'm still detecting that kind of what
Mhm.
fuzz. And I showed him, and he remembered some of the pedals that Tommy had had, and he collected a few over the years. So we were very happy to, you know, to kind of a small nod to Tommy's past.
Yeah, and it's still cool that, you know, a lot of post-rock bands would have taken that experience and would have written very sorrowful, dark, brooding, minor, minor keys, and so on. They would have made this, they would have turned this into like a very, very dark thing. But for you, when I listen to especially those two tracks, especially Fallen Leaves and especially Odyssey, yes, it's both tracks are a journey, um, but they don't end on a negative feeling. They end on a very, very positive feeling, and that's something that you can definitely be proud of, I think.
Yeah, and it was kind of, you see, you never know how you're going to react when something like that happens, and it just felt right to kind of celebrate his life in a way rather than mourn it altogether.
Yeah,
And it's, you know, don't get me wrong, it's really still painful that he's gone, but there's still so much to be thankful for. He died in his own garden. He didn't have
yeah.
to die in a hospice. He didn't have to die in a hospital.
He
You know,
didn't have to stay in a hospital for a long time.
no, and he didn't. He was never a burden to himself or to anybody. And I know that's the way he would have wanted it.
Yeah.
And bar timing, he would have been pretty pissed off. I know that. I can say, could you not make it 87? You know, or 97? Who knows? But
Yeah.
again, I just felt he's brought so much joy and happiness to us, and it just felt right that we'd make this uplifting and as much as we could to kind of capture
Mhm.
that feeling that we had. And I know he'd also said to me, make sure you don't write another epitaph because it's too dark. You know, it needs some of the brighter moments still need to come as well. So he'd been talking because he talked to me nearly every day about it, you know, when we were sitting
Yeah.
down at lunch or whatever. So he was definitely, I know he would have loved these. I know he never obviously
Yeah.
heard them. I only written it after he passed away, but I know he would have loved the melodies, and he loved melody. That was one thing that my father really loved was melody. Melody was king for him.
Yeah, you've given a lot of melodies on that new record. Um, Something that struck me, and I went back a few records. You seem to have developed a tendency for one-track titles, right? Or for one-word titles. How come? I've looked it up, and in the earlier records, you very often had like 2 words or 3 words, and now for a few years you seem to have been digging into the dictionary and looking up single-word track titles.
That's kind of Niels, I would say more than me. Niels is kind of very focused on he feels if there's a long title, for example, like From Dusk to the Beyond or Ascend to Oblivion, that it can come
Yeah,
over slightly pretentious.
yeah,
Uh, Even though when we did that at the time, they just came natural. But I think over the years, especially in instrumental music, you know, people seems to be almost it became a norm to have big long sentences to describe it. You know, the
Red
track.
Sparrows come to mind.
Yeah, like, and you know, they're an amazing band, and but we kind of wanted to avoid being overly precious, you know, where there's like these big long titles that are
Yeah.
kind of Niels kind of has a phobia with that. He just feels, can we not just keep it simple? I don't understand. I mean, we already have a long name as it is. Do we really need to have God as an astronaut from dusk to the beyond? He says it's just all a bit too just make it simple. And that was more Niels. Falling Leaves broke that but that to
Yeah.
me was not because that was because I tell you what it was because my father was in November 28th and he wanted
Yeah,
to
the police were falling.
and there was leaves falling
Yeah.
and that was I remember sitting on the chair talking to the medical services while Niels tried to resuscitate him and everything just went in slow motion and leaves just started to fall slowly and that was kind of I realized when I was writing it that that's what was etched in my mind, and I called it that. So sometimes we will use titles that I feel just describe the emotion that I was experiencing when I was writing it. And then sometimes Neil doesn't like some of the titles that I have, and he'll change them and tell me what he wants them to be. So I tend not to argue them these days.
Reverse. We have to talk about the title track, because that is one of these moments where I thought, like, okay, now they are very sure of what they do, and they are sure of where they're going. How did this track develop? Because it is quite different from some of your earlier material.
I'm trying to think how it developed. I do have this memory of my father saying to me, could you not write something in D minor? And I was thinking, why, what's with D minor? Just say he said a lot of kind of traditional Irish music was written in D minor. I think you could do something with D minor. So I said, okay, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll just record D minor just over and over and over again. And the part after the riff, when the drums come in first, there's a whole guitar just playing D minor. So that's where the song began, with it just a drone of D minor, and then I would play different melodies on the guitar behind it, and then Neil said come up with different bass notes against that to harmonize with it. And Lloyd had programmed the drums at that point. He was just typing it out on a kind of a sequencer, and it was kind of started from there. From there, we added some percussion, some kind of like organic. What do they call those drums again? Pan drums. I don't know what you know. They're like these.
Mm-hmm.
So so we got a pattern over that, and that kind of led us on to the next section. And I don't know how it got there, but Lloyd eventually came up with this idea to do a blast beat kind of part to it. And so yeah, so I don't know what it is. It's just like this weird. I don't know if it's dark metal or something. I don't know what it is, but this weird blast beat pattern comes in, and it was all odd timing because we were just jamming on the spot, hoping that this would all come together. And eventually that led us on to the whole breakdown section where I used a guitar slide with an EBow. And I had this wise idea to have like 3 or 4 guitars playing this whole weird, I guess in my mind, it's probably things never turn out the way I expect them to, but I had this in my mind, like it's almost like Led Zeppelin, Black Sabbath kind of idea,
Yeah.
but doing it in my own way with a kind of a spooky slide, kind of playing this kind of banshee kind of vibe to it. And that was kind of the next part that was written. And Neil said kind of and Jamie at the time as well, they came up with the bass line, and we kind of focused on, yeah, the whole song had so much ideas, and all I know was like 10 minutes long by the time we were finished with it. And after that I had a whole, actually, an analog synthesizer that I created, a whole analog synth part. And it's a real epic journey, I think, and then the whole end part is kind of insane. It's just pure noise, I guess, but with kind of a cool undertone with the percussion drum behind it. So it's definitely something different for us. And my father was alive for that one when I'd written that, and he really, really liked that song. He just says that's something special there. And then later on, I added a little bit of sitar and cello into it. There's only subtle amount of sitar. There was much more sitar, but I thought was taking it away from that particular one because it was so full. And parts have emptiness, and I wanted to keep those bits empty. I didn't want to fill them up too much. So that song is definitely a little bit different than the other ones. But I think it's definitely, I think it's going to be one of the bigger live tracks as well. I think it's live. It's sounding. All I know from rehearsal, we play Suicide by Star, and then we play that, and it's coming over better than Suicide by Star. So that's, to me, is a really, really good sign when that happens. So we're looking forward to playing that one live for sure.
Understandably. I mean, like, the track is, yes, very different, but it's so different in a positive way but you were confident enough in making it the title track. Or I don't know if it's, yeah, it's like the signature track of the record, because it is so different. Not that the other tracks are bad. No, they're all really good. It's like, but that is, yeah, it's something very different. And I think then you should also, I think you did the right thing in honoring and respecting that and saying, okay, this might not be something that we do on every record from now on, but we're able to do it. And I think that's also a cool thing. And that leads me to my next question, and the last question already before the infamous quickfire round. I've spoken about it now already a few times, but you have been doing this for decades. How sure are you nowadays of when you write something? How sure are you? Okay, that's a good one.
Well, usually if I write something and I think it's good, I put it into kind of like an A folder, and things that I'm unsure of I put into a B folder, and then things that I'm not excited about after a day I put into a C folder. I never lose anything. And a lot of the stuff on that album was already in the A folder, and you know,
I would have guessed so.
Some of it was in the B folder, and like some of the stuff that Joe had, for example, Prism, that was in the B folder. But when I sent it to Joe, I sent it by accident. She didn't mean to send it. I just zipped the whole file and I sent it, and she came back with the cello, and I said, I didn't mean to send that one. I don't know how it even
That's
got
so
in.
embarrassing.
Yeah, but she ended up putting this amazing cello to us, thinking, "Oh shit, I'm gonna have to use this now. This sounds really good." And I was really excited when Joe had kind of what she'd done with that song, and we obviously we had to write feat Joe Quayle on that, because without what she added to it, it wouldn't have been on the record. So she really added a lot to that particular song, and the other one as well, which was because the names, it's the other ambient one after Embers. I can't even remember the
Realms.
Realms. Yeah, Joe did a great job on that as well. Actually, the way that song was written it was written on a piano, and then I slowed the beat per minute down from say 120 down to 30 beats per minute, and then I reversed the whole piano sound, and I just sent it to Joe, and she came up with this amazing cello line to the whole song. And I love the fact that that is a nice break from Embers, because Embers is so intense. You get this nice passage of tranquility for a while. But yeah, really how it works for me is if I write something, or Niels writes something, or Neil or Lloyd comes up with something, and we step away for a couple of months and we come back to it and it sounds good to us, then it's a really good sign for us. Usually if something doesn't make the cut, you might be excited generally for about a week or two, and then you come back, maybe we've done a tour or two, and you come back and you listen to it again, you're thinking, oh, it's not as good as I remember. Because there is a blind spot that all artists have. You can listen to something, you say, I know this is a motive, because you're convincing yourself and you know the backstory to what you're trying to do, but nobody else does. So sometimes it's good to forget what your backstory is. Sometimes it's good to step away for a few months and say to yourself, I don't know, let me just listen to it without even thinking what it was about. And trust me, after you do it, especially when you do a tour and you're back into playing your old music, and then you come back and say, okay, let me listen to the new stuff again. So a lot of the songs that we'd written immediately were thrown to the C folder just through that process. And the next really difficult process for material is when you record it, because now you're learning the stuff off and you're starting to hate it, because you're no longer enjoying it, because now you have to get the performances really good. And another song had disappeared through that process. You know, we had a 10th song, and it started just to feel stale to me, and I said, let's just get rid of that. And even when you're mixing it, that's a whole nother process, because now you're sitting there mixing it, and then you're analyzing it, and then, you know, we spent a few weeks listening to it, and Lloyd and Niels, everybody made their points of view, what we maybe needed to do an edit here, or, you know, so I knew when the songs had gone through that entire process, usually it's past the benchmark test. There's obviously one last test that artists can't obviously do, which is, you know, unless you had a time machine, which is release the record, see how it was received, and you know, act accordingly. So sometimes we've gotten it wrong over the years, never too far wrong, but we have gotten it wrong once or twice. Certainly with the production on one or two of the records, Epitaph comes to mind. Mortal Coil was too slow, for example, on the tempos, and you know, so as time goes on, we tend to be a little bit more careful with making sure that we got it right. And it's definitely in the past. I've done some mastering myself. I wish I hadn't done that. So this time I didn't want to take any chances. I just wanted to send it to somebody that's not sitting in the same room as me, just a totally different room, and have a professional's perspective on it. And I think that's really helped a lot, because it's an awful lot of things, because I do all the mixing myself and other the writing. So it's good to at certain part of the process just to give it to somebody else to kind of help you finish it off. And but I was very overall, I am happy with the record. Again, you know, as I said, the last process is to see how the audience react to it, and from that we'll have a full picture. That's why when people say to me, "Do you think this is as good as All Is Violent, All Is Bright?" I don't know. I can't tell. There's no way I could possibly tell at this point.
Yeah, and I also always feel a tendency by people who say that. I always feel that tendency of them wanting to pinpoint something is not as equally good as something else. Where I often have a feeling, and throughout the course of me doing this here for the Veil of Sound, I have come to honor the process of a musician much more. And you know, we hear a record, we take an hour of time, sit down, put our headphones on, and after an hour, we think we are entitled to judge, which we're not, because, as you said, we don't know the backstory. I mean, even if somebody doesn't like Falling Leaves, which I think will not happen that often that somebody doesn't like it, but the backstory that you've just explained, the emotional value of the track. I mean, like, come on, if you can then still say, oh, it's rubbish and shit, then you might never have understood music in the first place, at least to me.
You know, for sure. I think some people, it's, you know, mindset is a very important thing for people, you know, because if you're, it depends on where their headspace is. You know, maybe Fallen Leaves did, as an example, didn't resonate with somebody. That can happen. But I think over the years, you know, especially, you have to have a little bit of faith in the bands that you like, and you know, maybe give it a chance, is what I'd say. And I think Falling Leaves, it is exactly the way it is because it needs to be that way. It has to be a journey. You know, some people might think maybe could it not just have less ups and downs in the track, maybe just have one piece, but that wouldn't have captured the full journey of what we needed to say. Some people might want something heavier, for example, but that just wouldn't have been correct to the emotion of that I needed to.
Yeah.
So, and then some people will look at it completely stylistically. They'll say, you know, this, it's not experimental enough or whatever, and that's fine too. You know, all I can say is we did add sitars and stuff like that into it, which, you know, I think added. But it worked on an emotive level. That's why it made it. It wasn't there just for stylistic reasons. It was there because it added something haunting to me. The sitar, actually, is a very interesting instrument, because when I used to say, you know, you have your software instruments on a sitar, and it sounds almost banjo like, you know, it's kind of got this extra zing to it. But when you hear it been played acoustically, it almost has qualities that a violin nearly has. It's so expressive in the bends, and it's just a really beautiful instrument that I don't think software catches perfectly. And I think Dara is a great musician, and he really added just these haunting bends, like quarter notes. They're not just like he's playing in between our notes. It's like in pitch. So I thought that was really interesting, and it added something magical to Falling Leaves. Just the different melodies. If you listen to it, there's melodies, his own melodies weaving in behind the main melody. And it's just really interesting what the sitar can do. And Joe, again, just the beautiful emotion that she has on the cello really just helped the song a lot. But at the end of the day, we don't see ourselves as an experimental band. What we make music from the heart, and that's what's important to us. And all I can say is for anybody that loved Fallen Leaves or didn't like Fallen Leaves, Embers is a completely different song that is coming next. So it's going to keep people guessing as to what the record is all about. But I still think the whole thing works together as one thing. But there's definitely different kind of vibes going on within the record as well.
Yeah, and I also think that that is what makes this record so interesting to me. So first of all, Torsten, thanks for all the insight into the record and also for the yeah, total honesty about the connection between the record and her father's death. I can totally feel that because my mom died 12 days later, so or very similar time frames there. And I can also understand you that you didn't want to turn this into another epitaph, because I did the same thing with my mom. And yeah, I think there is already too much sadness in the world, and therefore it's very nice to hear a record which does not try to tear jerk you to death, but which tries to give you a twinkle in the eye. And that's something that I really like. But of course, nobody leaves a Veil of Sound interview without the infamous quickfire round. Okay. And you always get two alternatives: AC/DC with Bon Scott versus AC/DC with Brian Johnston. We don't talk about AC/DC with Axl Rose. You will have to choose and give a short explanation for your choice. Let's start off with something simple. Irish rugby or German Fußball?
Irish rugby or German football? I probably have to go with German football because
of course you do.
I'm never really into rugby. I mean, it's an entertaining sport, but soccer would be more my game. You know, I enjoy football for sure.
Are you following the European Championships at the moment? Are you following the Euros?
I haven't actually been following it, and to be honest with you, because when my father was alive, the football would just automatically be switched on. So it's I probably, you know, because he's not there now, I'm not watching the football as much because he used to always switch it on. We have a bigger TV in a certain room, and he'd want to see it there, and I'd watch it with him, you know. But I know I'll definitely have to follow it. Yeah, I haven't been though, to be honest.
For transparency's sake, everybody who finds out on which day we are recording, England just scored a goal, but it didn't count against Slovenia. So those football nerds who automatically know, okay, that was on applause. For me, the next question is very easy. I don't know how easy it is for you. Where would you rather play a show right now? In Galway or in Cork?
I'd probably have to say Cork.
Yes, of course you have to.
Cork has we've always, well, I will say Cork has been the one place even before Dublin that kind of got behind our band. Cypress Avenue is the venue that we usually play in Cork, and they've always, no matter, you know, whether we were trending or we were unpopular, they always turned up to our shows. And then when we had literally no fan base, the Cork audience, you know, came up and stuck with us. So we're very very happy to play in Cork all the time, and Galway when it happens. But Cork is definitely going to have to win that one.
By the way, I will use this for a short shout out to our friend Pat O'Regan from Cork, who has also done a lot for the Irish post scene over a couple of years. You have been talking about traditional Irish music in a way, and therefore I will give you two Irish folk bands, and you have to choose between the Wolf Tones and the Dubliners.
Oh God. I'm probably going to choose the Dubliners on that one, to be honest. Yeah, I just think I think so. Yeah, but it's close though. It's close.
Yeah. I think when somebody asked me that, I would say I choose the Dubliners for the sheer quality of the oeuvre, of the body of work. When it comes to hits, I think the Wolf Tones have a few tracks that are really good.
Oh, they are.
Nevertheless, yeah, you go on.
Yeah, no, I just, my father knew the Dubliners very well, and
Yeah.
you know, we grew up listening to them, and the Wolf Tones, I think, I mean, they're doing extremely well now. But they kind of, I guess they were kind of went past my radar back in the day, but now you know, they've found a new young audience here in Ireland, which is great for them.
Let's go to musical questions for a moment. I'll give you some of the classic post-rock / post-metal couples, and you will have to decide. Let's start off with a band that sometimes reminds me of God is an Astronaut, and that is Russian Circles. Russian Circles versus Red Sparrows.
Oh, wow. I mean,
and it's not a question about which band you like more. Whose record would you put on right now?
God, that's a really tough one, because both bands kind of offer different flavors. I think if you were in a more, I would say, meditative mood, Red Sparrows would be the one that you would put on if you wanted to listen to something that's, you know, that kind of gets your head nodding. That's definitely Russian Circles there. But both really, really good bands.
Right now,
I probably have to give it to Russian Circles slightly, because I think you know, they're still very active and still putting out good records. Red Sparrows have been a little bit dormant, I think, as of late. So I think there's more stuff to pick from Russian Circles. But I have to say, if you're in a more meditative mind, I do think Sparrows has something more to offer in that department. But I will give it to Russian Circles on this one.
That's also already clear from the track lengths. I mean, Russian Circles are very good at what they do, and they're very concise. Red Sparrows are able to expand on motifs much longer. They're very patient.
Oh,
or
for
they
sure.
were very patient.
And they had like lovely. I really like their material, you know. So I think you know, let's hope they put out another record at some point.
Not sure if that will happen, but I would buy tickets for that one.
Sure.
Let's go to some of the like early post-rock bands.
Okay.
Slint from the US versus Mogwai from Scotland.
I'd have to, you know, I'd have to give it to Mogwai for me personally. Yeah, I mean, the argument there is the Slint was kind of like a groundbreaking, some people say created the genre of post-rock. But for me, Mogwai has a more emphasis on melody, and to me that's more important. And I think Mogwai has written some really good material, so definitely Mogwai on that one.
Ranges versus Godspeed You Black Emperor.
You know, I'm not overly familiar with Ranges, so that's so I'm at a disadvantage there on that one. So obviously I'm a little bit more familiar with Godspeed.
Okay, so I'll give you another partner for Godspeed. Silver Mount Zion.
Again, I've heard the name. I haven't sat down. I know this is terrible. I haven't listened to. I might have heard a track or two, but again, it would be very unfair for me to dismiss them and give it to Godspeed.
Yeah, and for all the post-rock fans in Quebec, don't kill them when they come to town.
I'm sorry. Yeah, no, I mean this. I mean, I'm sure.
Good. All good, Torsten.
Yeah, there must be
two bands that you definitely know because they come from close to you. U2 versus The Script.
I probably have to give it to U2, to be honest. There's a lot of hatred here in Ireland for the U2 because of his
not only in Ireland,
or everywhere, because of his their egotistical politics. You know, some people are giving out about they're speaking out against Russia and not saying anything about the whole Israel-Palestine situation. I don't think politics works well with music. That's just my opinion. I'd rather people stay out of it really. But I still think U2 have come up with better music. I don't like
Yeah.
the script. So yeah, it's not for me. But that's not to say that they're bad. It's just not my cup of tea. It's just a different style of music that I just can't bend to.
Yeah, I can understand, but I mean, like the script have some awesome pop hits.
For sure.
But anybody who listens to the Joshua Tree album and is not moved by what he or she hears, or they hear, sorry,
Yeah,
yeah,
no, forget
again,
about
didn't
it.
understand music.
Yeah, no, I think you too. We grew up in the 80s and the 90s, and all I can say is you two have come up with a lot of very, very good material.
Yeah,
And sometimes the personalities can overshadow the standard that you two came up. But there's a reason you two became one of the biggest rock bands in the
yeah,
world. Because they'd written really good material.
yeah,
And
definitely.
people can criticize the Edge, and all I can say, he's a very innovative musician. He
Definitely.
used pedals and effects and delays in a way that I think he was doing that before Kevin Shields was doing music. This Edge was
Yeah,
going along.
exactly.
So I think you have to kind of, if the band was never got as big as they did, they probably most of the people would say they're the most underrated band ever. So I
Yeah,
think
definitely.
they definitely. I can see the hatred and I can see why it's there, but you can't take away the standard. The standard is
Totally. A post-rock couple that is, I know, not for everybody's liking, but I think there are a few moments on the new record, on your new record, where I say like, there is a bit of that in there. Caspian versus Maserati, and the Maserati, I hear even more Maserati than Caspian on the new record.
um I'm gonna have to go with Caspian on that because like we're good friends, Phil, and the guys. I know we played with them a lot of time, but Maserati are excellent as well.
Yeah,
But we toured with Caspian in the early days, and that there's a good connection with that band, and Phil works really really hard, and he's a good guy, so I'll have to choose Caspian on that one, but Maserati has excellent, excellent group.
they're really good, right? Two more Ireland related questions. Um, where would you rather spend a day, not a week or so, a day, on the Skelligs or on the Aran Islands?
Well, I probably have to maybe choose Skelligs because of Star Wars, because and I've never been there. I've been on the Iron Islands before, so I am a Star Wars fan. So I'd like to maybe go to the Skelligs and check the whole Luke Skywalker vibe out there. Yeah,
I'm very happy that I've been to both places 22 years ago, because before nobody thought about the Skelligs being a
yeah,
location for Star Wars.
yeah.
Um,
Great location.
Definitely, it's I was very fortunate to spend a year in Cork, and I remember begging two of my friends to come with me to the Skelligs. And back then it wasn't as easy as it is nowadays. We had to do some research and a lot of stuff to make it happen on a weekend. It's really interesting. It's really interesting. Also to think that people really lived there voluntarily. Much more amazing to me than the Aran Islands. Not to take anything away from the Aran experience. Uh, that is a very appealing place to me as well. But the Skelligs, yeah, they hit a different spot. And the last one, I was thinking about, like, okay, connecting popular culture and music and Ireland, and then it struck me that I could give you two Irish music movies.
Okay.
The Commitments versus Once.
I'm embarrassed to say that I never watched Once. I obviously heard Glenn's music that he had written on it, and I thought it was really, really
It's
heartfelt
really
music. It's excellent. The Commitments I did enjoy. It was very humorous. It was funny. I found it quite enjoyable. So unfortunately, I didn't watch Once. It's I'm kind of more into sci-fi and as you probably would imagine, and even horror movies. So I could be quite stubborn. My wife there loves to watch all sorts of different films, drama, and different things like that. I can be quite stubborn that way, and I prefer to watch like The Thing or something, you know, or Alien. But I did watch The Commitments when it came out. And I did enjoy it, I have to say.
It is a really enjoyable movie, isn't it?
It's a
What is
nice.
it? The Irish of the niggas of the and sorry the of Europe, and the Dubliners are the of Ireland, and the Northsiders are the of Dublin. That's just a classic line. I mean, nobody will forget that, right?
Sure.
Although I have to say, I was very proud of my little girl. We were sitting in the car, and I had the Once soundtrack playing on CD. And after a while, I told her, "Well, that's the soundtrack to a movie," and she said, "Like, okay, we have to watch that one." And yeah, I was really happy that she liked it. So
Yeah, I think Glenn has written some of his best stuff on
yeah,
that.
yeah,
I think that's you can owe a lot of that to his success today, you know, for the music that he put out there. And you know, what people don't know, that, you know, Glenn had a tough time, especially with the press here in Ireland, and he had a group called Frames DC,
yeah,
and I think he proved them all wrong. I think he proved that he belongs on an international level, and
yeah,
I think that definitely, that soundtrack did a lot for him and his career, for sure.
yeah. And I think it was also a very good thing that he then continued that musical relationship with what was her name? Marketa? No, I
Yes,
forgot. Hmm?
I think it's Marquetta.
Yeah. So with when they continued that into the 12th season, that
Yeah,
was a
that was,
very, very good decision because both work so well. It's a really, really great soundtrack. And Mr. Kinsella, also a good movie to watch with your wife at one
yeah, I
point
know.
or another.
Just films that that I'd watch that I haven't. It's usually always ends up being I kind of like time traveling stuff, and I like all the kind of stuff that kind of, you know, just kind of, it just, you know, puts you in a kind of a, gets your mind thinking. You know, I like those kind of
Yeah.
films. Drama definitely has its strong points. I'll have to start to, you know, make her happy again. See what I
Well,
can
you've
do.
made you and your brother and Lloyd definitely made a lot of people happy, or are gonna make a lot of people happy with the new record. You
Thank,
definitely made a German really happy with the new record.
thank you.
I know you will get a lot of positive feedback on the record, and very well deservedly so. So, Torsten, thanks for all your time. Thanks for the wonderful details, and enjoy the rest of your evening, my friend.
You too. Thanks so much for the interview. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thanks.